and welcome everybody to this Japan update. So what's life like? And that's a really good question. I think Japan, like every other country, is grappling with change as it relates to COVID. Japan is currently going on the downside of quite a big COVID wave. The numbers are dropping rapidly at the moment, which is great to see, but until a week or two ago, they were at record highs. So the numbers were over 200,000 cases a day only a week or two ago, but now just under 100,000. So they're coming down quite significantly, and let's hope there's not a big wave like that in the future. But I guess we're all used to the unexpected. In relation to the COVID pandemic here, the Japanese government has maintained quite a few settings that affect the border, and probably safe to say that at the moment Japan's one of the most conservative jurisdictions in relation to border controls. Australia, of course, was very, very tight and restrictive early on, but now is one of the most open borders in that sense. Just the other day, there was some new updates made by the government here, and in fact, these take effect tomorrow, so this update's pretty timely. And as we see on the slide here, effective 7th of September, there'll be a maximum of 50,000 arrivals allowed into Japan every day. That includes Japanese and non-Japanese alike. And that's around 40 to 50% of the actual traffic in 2019. So it's still a pretty tight restriction, and it is an improvement. As of today, it's 20,000 a day, and it goes up to 50,000 a day. So it's more than double, but still less than half of the 2019 traffic. And in terms of inbound to Japan, Aussies coming up or other people coming into Japan, there is a restriction on FIT. It's been loosened a little bit, effective tomorrow, but basically people who come in will need to be on a package tour of airfares and accommodation for the foreseeable future. We're not sure when that will be removed as a restriction, but at least tourism can start to come back into Japan, which helps the industry here as well, and perhaps even more importantly, helps the airlines to balance their demand and encourage them to grow capacity back a little bit, which leads into airline capacity and frequency. And we have seen some reasonable improvement in the airline capacity of late. Mostly during COVID, we were down to 5 flights a week between Tokyo and Sydney on ANA, and around 2 or 3 on Japan Airlines. Both ANA and JAL continued to operate right through the pandemic. We have seen, though, really good announcements coming out. Jetstar started its 3 services into Queensland in July and early August, Cairns and Gold Coast, which is very welcome. And ANA is now operating daily between Tokyo and Sydney. The next phase of increases come next week, in fact, when Qantas restarts services, and that's a big milestone for the industry. I think it will be very, very, very well received. Qantas will start with 3 services a week from Tokyo to Sydney, starting on the 13th of September, and then ramping that up to daily in October, and they'll also commence Brisbane services early December at 3 a week, I think, to start. The airline frequency and capacity has a long way to go. ANA has not yet announced when they will recommence their service to Perth, which was very popular just before COVID. That may be at the end of March next year, but not 100% confirmed. And JAL's operating down to Melbourne. Qantas is saying they will not operate to Melbourne until probably March next year at this stage. Now, of course, for the top end, the domestic connections are really critical. And I think from all those major gateways that I mentioned, which have non-stop services from Japan to Australia, there's domestic connectivity up to Darwin, and that's obviously the key to the flow of traffic. Let's have a look at our Tourism Australia strategy for Japan, and it is a strategy on a page, which is always a nice challenge to fit everything on one page, and the font gets smaller and smaller. But I'll just hit the high points for you all here. And the interesting things that I'd like to point out today are some of our forecasts for recovery. So this top line here, our ambition. First ambition, of course, is to recover our 2019 levels and then to grow further from there. We think it will probably take until financial year 2024. So that's 2023-24 financial year, end of June 2024, for that recovery to occur. Hopefully earlier, but I think these projections are in line with many forecasts that are being shared by international organizations. So it's probably something around there. By the end of FY23, that is June next year, we hope for Japan to Australia that we're back to 60 to 70% of 2019 levels. So that hinges on a number of things. It hinges on the Japanese government restrictions being further eased. It hinges on good further growth in airline capacity and the general recovery of demand from Japan. Some of the other things that I'd just like to touch on here, our audiences, our primary audience for Japan, our target market, if you will, are the so-called high-yielding travelers. And in our definition, these are people who spend over $200 a night and over $1,500 on a round trip. I think in the most cases, travelers from Japan will fit that bill. Premium luxury is a secondary target for us, and working holiday is a secondary target. We've had quite a bit of success in the last 6 to 8 months in working holiday. That was one of the first segments to open up, and we did spend quite a lot of time and effort and money in promoting Australia as a working holiday destination. I think there are at least 3,000 Japanese working holiday makers who have already arrived in Australia this year, and over 5,000 visas issued. So there are more people to actually arrive. I think Japan is around about number 6 or 7 in the world in terms of source countries for working holiday makers. Business events, we're always on the lookout. It's not a primary target for us in Japan, but it is certainly something that we do follow and support where we can. And just before I move on to the next slide, these strategic priorities may be of interest to you, and these guide us really every day, every week, as we're rolling out activity and planning activity along with our state tourism organisation colleagues as well. Reinvigorating our brand to recapture market share. Now, our executive has mentioned publicly already that there's a major new campaign being prepared to roll out around the world, and that's coming later this year. It's very exciting, and don't have any details to share with you today yet. It's still under wraps in terms of detail, but very exciting, and Japan will be one of the big markets where we will run the campaign. Maximizing conversion and supporting aviation recovery. Not only building the brand and building awareness and intention, but trying to assist the conversion as well, which is really where the rubber hits the road, and where people are buying their tickets to come down. We've started a marketplace on our australia.jp Tourism Australia website in Japan with deals and offers, but more than that, working with the key distribution partners who sell probably 80% of the business and will continue to post-COVID, do everything we can to help them to implement practical promotional ideas that drive business down to Australia, and supporting airlines as well as part of that. Airlines obviously selling a bit more and more direct, but without the airline capacity, the distribution partners have nothing really to sell. Number 3 is rejuvenating advocacy, working with the trade and media. We've had, I think, good success over the COVID period in keeping Australia front of mind in the Japanese market. And that's working with traditional media, television, newspapers, magazines, as well as leveraging social media channels, our own and those of influencers and the KDPs themselves. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. One that's, I think, particularly relevant and important for top end is elevating and championing the Indigenous and sustainable tourism opportunities. And I think it's good to know, or good for you to know if you're not aware, that the sustainable tourism opportunities and sustainability generally is a very big topic in Japan. The amount of coverage and interest that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals get in Japan is quite remarkable. It's very, very high. And I think that is a good underpinning for us to continue to promote sustainable tourism. Indigenous tourism opportunities, very, very important and gaining interest. We want to do more and more on that opportunity over the next few years, and hence it's one of our key strategic priorities. Generally supporting industry recovery and growth and business events. So that gives you a strategic view of how we organize ourselves, where we put our priorities, and where we're aiming for, what we're aiming for. Moving on now to some more specifics of research. And this research is our most recent result, and based on in-market surveys towards the end of June. So it's quite new, and it shows very interesting pictures, which I think will be useful to you to understand the market movement. On the left-hand side, we're tracking the awareness in the Japanese market of tourism, excuse me, tourism experiences in various countries. Hawaii is a standout and is always well ahead of the pack. We do benchmark, of course, there, but Hawaii has a very, very long-standing and very significant part in the Japanese market, which most of you would appreciate. Australia's coming in second and has been in that great second place all through the last 5 or 6 years, and even going back further than that. The good thing is there that the awareness is going up. And if you look at awareness from 2016, way before COVID, up to now, there's a big increase of about 13 or 14 points. Now, other countries are also going up. So other countries are doing their thing. And that's fine because it lifts the tourism boat, I think. But good to see that Australia is still improving and is in a very good position. Consideration of these particular countries as a tourism destination by individuals. We're in that very strong second group. Australia, USA, France, and Italy are typically vying for second, third place there, and we retain our position in that second group. Obviously, Italy and France and USA all have their own characteristics, but and they're all longer haul destinations as Australia is. The interesting thing then is to look at the actual intention to travel. A similar group clumped together there in a slightly different order, but again, Australia is in that group that is in the second big clump. Hawaii is a standout, and the figures for Hawaii are generally in that league. This one should be of interest too. I think it tracks on the left-hand side consumer confidence over the last few years, and probably not dissimilar to many countries. Consumer confidence is not terribly strong. The way we measure it in these surveys, it's currently at around 69%, which is less than 100, and that's in the negative territory. If we get to 100, we are looking at positive, confident territory there. So overall consumer confidence is pretty low, and that's a combination of a whole lot of things: the economy, COVID, world affairs, etc. That in turn translates into a pretty low travel intention within the next 6 months. Only about 7% of respondees are saying they intend to travel internationally in the next 6 months. Only 4% intend to book in the next month. The good news is, though, that about 2/3 of people see Australia as a safe destination, safe in the sense of mainly at the moment in the COVID sense, but the relative safety and security that Australia offers at all times is seen as a very positive thing. And top end is obviously one of the great shining examples of that in terms of Australia. This one's pretty busy, so I'll send the slides through to the team, and they can have those with them. But top left, attitudes towards the next holiday. I'm not thinking about my next holiday right now, 60%. So it's nearly 2/3 of people are still not really thinking about their overseas holiday. 18% are thinking, dreaming, and 21% are researching. This middle section here, I can't see myself traveling internationally at all in the future, 40. That's up 4. We have to recognize that a lot of people don't travel internationally anyway. So there's always a group that's never going to be interested. Cautious, 42%, and then single digits at the moment are considering. It'll be really critical to see the next round of research, which should come out in the next couple of months. As Japan has slowly opened up, as COVID wanes again here, as people do start traveling, I think the word of mouth and the effect of industry advertising and promotions will bump these numbers up. But the question is how quickly they will move. I'm just conscious of time, and we've got about half an hour left. I want to make sure we have 5 or 10 minutes at least for questions at the end. So I will move on to this, which is, I think, the last research slide. Looking at the levels of comfort with different types of trips. On the left, domestic Japan. There has been, through COVID, quite a barrier against domestic leisure travel. That's been mainly based on perceptions of travel and the light guidance, if you like, from prefectural authorities in Japan. There's never been anything to physically prevent somebody from visiting other places in Japan. No real legal imperatives against it, but people have been reluctant to travel in many cases. That's absolutely starting to change, and the recent summer holidays in August had quite a lot of people traveling. But the numbers here show that the red and the light green, if you add them together, 55% of people as at June were not comfortable or might consider a domestic trip. So that indicates there's still quite a level of reticence. If we look at international trips, the red numbers are much higher. Over half of people, both within the 4-hour flight and beyond 4-hour flights, were reluctant to, were not comfortable with the idea of international trips. Again, it'll be interesting to see how that moves. I think that concern will start to drop as time goes on, and the big question is how quickly. As Japan opens up and people get experience and tell their friends and families that it was easy to travel and that it was smooth and there were no big problems at all. One of the restrictions, I didn't put it on the slide, but an important one that's also been removed effective tomorrow is that travelers coming back into Japan from overseas will no longer require a PCR test before they come back in. So example is people who come to Australia have up until now had to do a PCR test in Australia within 3 days of their departure back to Japan. And that, of course, is not terribly popular in that, A, it can be a bit tricky to find a clinic if you're not a local. B, costs money. And if you're traveling as a family, those costs really add up. But C, I think even most importantly, a lot of people worry about what will happen if they do test positive. A, they won't be allowed back into Japan until they're out of isolation. B, well, where will I stay when I'm isolating? See how much is that going to cost? And my schedule back in Japan is now ruined. That requirement is disappearing from tomorrow, which is a pretty big deal. And that means that if you are triple vaccinated going into Japan, you will not need a PCR test before arriving in Japan. So that's a big step. And a lot of our distribution partners talk about that as a very material improvement in the situation. Having a look at key distribution partners, I've listed here some of the operators who do have top-end product, and no doubt there are others. This is just a snapshot as of today and a summary. Veltra, which is known to many of you, I'm sure, a growing and fairly large OTA in Japan. Australian Tour Specialist, ATS, Hot Holiday, and HIS all have top-end product. If we take a step back, though, and look at the activities of the big distribution players in Japan, pretty well all of them now have Australian product. The question is exactly what sort of product is it and how is it marketed? Some of them have moved away from the big, thick brochures that we all know and love from years back. And interestingly, which is, I think, a telling sign for the way the distribution's changing a bit, JTB, which continues to be the biggest operator, has largely moved away from seasonal, thick destination brochures. They're still printing some of them, but largely they've moved away and trying to move online to provide detailed information to customers and potential customers. HIS, on the other hand, which is the number 2 player, and years ago was the maverick in the industry, now one of the more established players, HIS has maintained its brochure production, which is, I think, to me, quite fascinating, because as a maverick in the industry trying to do things differently over the years, they have now decided to keep their brochures, but JTB, which is the bigger, older, more conservative, traditional player, is trying to digitize quicker. So we'll see how all that plays out. I think for today, though, it's important to stress that the big players do have Australia product. Some of it is dynamic packages, which rely more on online availability, real-time availability, I should say, and marketed more online. Some of them have package product for accommodation and air. Some are starting to have some guided tour product as well. They have to really rebuild their entire product suite, and the international operations of the big wholesalers and agents in Japan were largely mothballed for a couple of years. They now are bringing back their staff. They're going through a restart of their entire operation, trying to rebuild their ground services in the US, in Europe, in Australia. There aren't that many Japanese-speaking staff available as tour guides in many places. So it's quite difficult for them to switch things on overnight, as you can appreciate. In many sectors of the economy, there are similar challenges being faced where staffing's not to the level that people need, etc. So it's a phased restart, reintroduction. But we're working with all of the big players very, very closely, and many of the up and coming players as well. And they all say to us very, very sincerely that Australia is a very big part of their worldwide product suite, and many of them have significant investments in Australia that they need to see a good return on. So over this recovery period, I'm sure we'll see some better results coming through. If we look at Tourism Australia's own marketing activity in Japan, some fairly big things coming up. Some of you on the call may be heading this way for Japan marketplace at the end of this month, and possibly even visiting Korea as well, which is just before the Japan marketplace. I think we have around 60 Australian tourism sellers coming up, which is a great result, and there's certainly a pent-up demand from the Aussie side, but also from the Japanese side, to meet with the Australian sellers here in Tokyo, 29 and 30 September. The other pillar, I guess, I wanted to touch on today was earned media, and earned in the sense that we don't pay for it, we earn it, as it were. So based on PR potential, social media is part of that. We have growing social media channels of our own here in Tourism Australia and Japan in Japanese language, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also using YouTube. Those audiences are growing. Facebook itself's not growing in terms of followers, but our reach is improving, and it's step by step a really cost-effective and useful channel for us. We also do collaborative work with our state tourism organisation colleagues and other partners there. PR itself, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, we've had good success right through COVID in reaching television, newspaper, magazine, and online digital publications, and the level of interest in Australia is really high and very encouraging. We're continuing with that as a major plank of our activity. Working with the trade every day, good relationships with all the major players, as I've mentioned earlier, but interesting newer players coming through. Veltra is one of those that we work closely with, and is very proactive, very friendly towards Australia. They don't sell air, but they sell experiences, essentially. They don't sell air at this stage, and the airfares, of course, are available through the bigger wholesalers or the airlines direct. Advertising is another big activity in our strategic mix, and we have this year conducted what we call a relaunch campaign. The market was open from December last year, but very small numbers of people were traveling from Japan. We determined that April was the big opportunity before Golden Week, and launched our reopening campaign at that point. We then went back after Golden Week and did a second blast through June. That campaign was well received, and Australia was out in front, one of the first tourism destinations to really do a big campaign to kickstart the international market. So I think we did well to time it that way. We were, if you like, between a rock and a hard place when we were determining the timing. Some people were saying to us, oh, that's too early, you're wasting your money. And then almost the same number of people were saying, what are you waiting for? Go now, go now, go now. So, I think we were probably all in all going out at the right time. And it was an interesting process to work out when the best time was to launch that activity. Opportunities for promotion, and many of you will be aware of this already, I guess. Working through Tourism Northern Territory, I think, is the best way to channel into this list of opportunities. These are all things that we do here in market, and they are opportunities to focus in on particular aspects of the top end or experiences or both. And the Aussie Specialist Program, which you may be aware of in many cases, there is our Tourism Australia ongoing frontline travel agent training program. It's been going for many years, very successful, and it is our signature program for the frontliners. Tourism Northern Territory, of course, is a great participant in that program, and through their offices, I'm sure there are opportunities for all of you to potentially have your experiences and your offerings featured in one way or another over the coming months and coming period. We do a monthly trade newsletter, which goes to essentially all of the Japanese travel agents, and this is more towards planners and management rather than frontliners. The frontliners are covered by the Aussie Specialist Program. This monthly trade newsletter is one that's targeted more to the decision makers, and that again is an opportunity for you through Tourism Northern Territory to get your message across. They do give us content for that every month, and Tanaka-san from Tourism Northern Territory here in Tokyo is our key contact for that. Similarly, we have a media newsletter that goes to the television stations, newspapers, magazines, which showcases content of interesting and new things right across Australia. So that's something that can also, I think, be accessed through Tourism Northern Territory. And social media posts, we have a protocol whereby we work with our State Tourism Office, State and Territory Tourism Office colleagues here in Japan to utilize our Tourism Australia social media channels where we can to feature content and unique offerings from states and territories. And then finally, our website, there is a channel established through our head office and Tourism Northern Territory to feature content on a regular basis on our English language and Japanese language websites. That's it from me. Hopefully that might trigger a few questions or thoughts or brickbats or bouquets. So I'll hand back, but happy to talk any of that through in more detail or answer any questions.
Derek, thanks. That was a fantastic and very comprehensive presentation. We really appreciate that. As we now just sort out the screen, there we go. You walked us through a number of things, which is great to hear what the key focus destinations were, effectively who Australia's up against in Japan. You walked us through the aviation partners. Of course, Singapore Airlines fly multiple times a week Singapore into Osaka, Tokyo, and other big bases in Japan. So the air traffic routes there, and it's tremendous to also hear about the movement from those big tourism players and some of those emerging OTAs. And I'm really was interested by comments around JTB. They're moving to be a more nimble player online, and HIS. Yeah, so I certainly did always thought about those two as the opposites of what you've discussed them now. Mate, I have a couple of questions, and while we do this, if anyone's got any questions, please pop them in the chat for Derek while he's live from Tokyo. We have a very little window of wonderful opportunity here if you've got a question. I'd like to start off, Derek. Hawaii's always been the #1 destination for Japan. And whilst in the top end here, we don't have big luxurious resorts, we don't have Waikiki Beach with all its shopping. We do have surfing, but it comes with its challenges, aka crocodiles. But the one thing that we do have, the couple of things we do have here is we have fantastic Indigenous experiences, and we have very long history and heritage and connections with Japan, both on a historical level. Those that we're able to work together on now, I refer to the bombing of Darwin, but also deeper back to the Pearling Days, which you and I were chatting about earlier. Today online, we have some of our wonderful Aboriginal members of Tourism Top End. We have Tess from NT Indigenous Tours. We have Ben Tyler from Kakadu Kitchen. We've got Simone from Aboriginal Bush Traders. How did Japanese travellers think about, when they're thinking about other markets, Indigenous experiences? Is that popular in the Hawaii programs, or is it popular in other destinations? And what are your thoughts around the Japanese curriculum and awareness of our First Nations culture? And in the top end in particular, 65,000 years in some parts uninterrupted culture.
It's a really rich topic, isn't it? And I think there are great opportunities which we want to build on over time, and working with you and your members, I think, would be really useful. That the connectivity there with sustainability and with Australia's very, very long history is possibly the key to going forward to build more and more interest. There is burgeoning interest in the Indigenous tourism experiences in Australia. Probably the awareness is still on the low side.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do more together to build that. And I think there's some great opportunities. As I said earlier, sustainable development is a big topic in Japan, works perfectly well with Indigenous travel experiences and with Australia in general. And there's also a very strong interest amongst many Japanese travelers about the history of places. And I think I wouldn't be the only one to say that Australia, in terms of the overall general perceptions of travelers, probably suffers in the sense it's seen as, in many cases, a young country, when in fact, of course, it's not a young country at all. 60 or 70,000 years of very interesting continuous culture. And our collective challenge, I guess, is how to use that to advantage, to tell more people about it, to invite more people in to experience it. And how can we get the message across more effectively? And I think that's one of our strategic priorities this year and going forward, not only for Japan, but for almost all of our other source markets too. How can we introduce to more Japanese travelers these wonderful experiences? I think always language is an issue, in the sense of Japanese travelers will typically be more comfortable if there's some sort of Japanese language capability within the experience, which doesn't have to be always live Japanese interpretation or Japanese speaking guides. It can be digital digitally based if it fits the experience.
Mhm.
But the availability of Japanese language promotional material and explanatory material is always really welcome, and is often part of the distribution journey as well. So if a particular experience or operation has that ability to do some of the material in Japanese and or have Japanese speaking staff on hand or digital, then I think it's going to help you in the distribution journey, but also will be really popular with the travelers. Of course, some people speak good English and they're totally comfortable, but in the main, I think Japanese travelers will be super happy if they know there's some Japanese language capability. And to summarize that, I think great opportunities. We need to do more, and we are all through our channels trying to ramp up the content and the focus on these areas.
It's interesting. Thanks for that. I think I hear two messages in that. One, there is tremendous interest, but what I also heard was the language. And I think one of the great opportunities, besides learning about culture and the visuals, you know, visiting the great galleries and seeing the 40,000 rock art on some of our escarpments and spending time with Aboriginal people. But I think one of the great things is finding out the Japanese word for this is this, the Aboriginal word for that is this. And I think there's some of the shared experiences, rather than thinking about it as a painful language exchange experience. That's actually part of the reason I would guess people would travel and enjoy that learning and of culture, not just seeing it and taking a selfie with it.
Yeah, fully agree. That's a good way in, and probably a memorable way to run some of those experiences as well. I think the word of mouth promotion is always so important. If people can come back from a great experience in the top end and tell their friends and family about what they've learned and how they felt, it's going to be at least as powerful as any advertising or PR we can ever do.
Derek, and Danielle Thomas said, hi, thanks to everyone. Thanks, Derek. She needs to jump off.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for joining us, Danielle. The other key topic for us is, and we mentioned just in the chat prior to, today's the fourth last day of Pitch Black, which is a major Air Force operation here, which first time the Japanese self-defense Air Force are here. And yesterday we had the head of Japan's Air Force laying a wreath at the cenotaph in commemorating the bombing of Darwin. And we've seen that. We've seen the late Shinzo Abe here present, and you know, not hiding from it and talking about the great relationship between the top end, Darwin, and the broader top end with all its World War II history, and I think it's a bit of a tough one, isn't it? Because it's how do we talk about this, but at the same time recognise it. And it's the same situation when it comes to Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, having been there myself and been there with tourists from Japan out on the Arizona in the middle of the harbor, doing that experience. What are your thoughts around that? And what are your thoughts around history in general and Japanese travelers and their interest to sort of get out on the history trail and explore more than just the sort of the traditional picture many people might have as, you know, shopping and traditional tours?
Great point. And personally, I'm always fascinated by interesting historical stories and treatment in tourism experiences. If I can offer, it's probably a personal opinion, I guess, but keep everything factual and just tell the story. You know, this happened. We have this great history between Japan and the top end. It goes back, you know, to the 19th century. Here are some of the milestones. Here are some of the stories. Lay out the facts. And I think historical stories are very powerful in terms of igniting people's interest, and it's the sort of thing that people talk about when they get home too. Oh, I didn't know that Japanese were in Northern Territory in the 19th century. I mean, we never learnt that at school, you know, but we found this out. And I think a good basis to weave stories together for travelers, absolutely. Interesting you talk about Pearl Harbor, and I had the chance to go there a few years ago as well, and experience that. I think as long as it's factual and it's not trying to put any particular spin on things, I think people appreciate to learn what actually happened and some of the experiences that people went through, both good and bad. And that's what you're talking about. I guess it's recognized now, and the visit by the Japanese self-defense forces at the moment is a good indication of this really strong relationship that's developed between the two countries, and based on a shared understanding of the past, but great opportunities going forward. Yeah,
great. Derek, language is important. Since in the early 90s, when I was in international distribution, and Japan for me was also important around food. What are your thoughts on Japan of today and travellers of today as they're travelling out? We traditionally used to see that there always needs to be the miso soup and the rice on the buffet in the morning. The taste buds of Japanese travellers a little bit more adventurous, or still looking to have some of those core foods as they travel as well? Those comfort foods, I should say.
I think both, and if you can offer some Japanese cuisine, then you'll always get takers, I'm sure. But there is absolutely a growing sophistication, call it that, or internationalization of the food and wine scene in Japan. The research that we do consistently says that food and wine, or food and drink, doesn't have to be wine, is a key destination choice driver in this market. It's not the only one. It's not the only thing people think about when they're choosing their destination, but it's one of a number of things that people typically think about, along with safety and security and, you know, price and distance, of course. But food and wine, critical. And again, as part of our Tourism Australia work and working with the STOs and our media partners, etc., we're always trying to reinforce that Australia does have some wonderful, not only traditional but modern cuisine options. And again, getting back to that earlier point about Indigenous travel experiences, I think bush tucker and the barramundi that's on your logo there, barramundi with lemon myrtle on a barbecue in a smoke pit, for example. What better way to showcase some of the great food and wine options that we have in Australia? So I think it's really important. We're probably running out of time, but it's absolutely a critical one, and quite a rich area of opportunity, I think. So we are in a reasonably good position in terms of our research in that people think Australia is a pretty good food and wine destination. But when they actually come, they think it's even better. So that's encouraging, and it's good for word of mouth, but it's also a pretty rich vein to tap into, I think. The more we can highlight and position unique Australian food and wine offerings, it's only going to help our marketing effort.
And Derek, I'll probably wrap up, and just you talked about the travel intent, and that's pretty low, and it's understandable. There are really Japan's going through yet another strong wave of COVID, and our hearts are with your family and friends and all our partners in Japan to come out of this. For businesses who are thinking about their timing, getting back in Japan, and they're possibly not going on this trip this month, what are your thoughts around the bounce back of the market? And when people are thinking about the planning of their business, when do you think that Japan would come back to all things being equal, and we assume that what's happening now is behind us? When would we see? When would we be planning? Would it be 2023, 2024? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a gradual ramp up, and it steps up. It's a bit of a chicken and egg. As aviation capacity is returning, the confidence of the market to sell goes up, but aviation capacity won't go up unless there's a bit of confidence. So it moves like that. And I guess you could probably look at it in terms of the two big seasons of the year, the northern winter, northern summer. We're seeing that airline capacity is going to ramp up from the end of October. And then the next big ramp up is the end of March. So those seasons are probably still somewhat important in terms of the planning cycle, but you've got to get in at the right point. So, if we think air capacity is going to jump up again at the end of March, well, you've got to get in several months before that to get into the brochures and the planning cycle. That's right. So, and I do
have one last question, and I look at the list of people who are online, and I feel some of them might be interested. You mentioned Golden Week before. Could you give us a bit of an insight to what is Golden Week? I think it's one of those things in industry we move through. It's part of our jargon. When we talk about Japan market, we say Golden Week, and we all sit there nodding, going, "Yep, I'd actually have no idea what is Golden Week."
Yeah, it's a good question. It is the period right at the end of April and early May, and there's a series of public holidays. People tend to join those public holidays together by taking some of their own annual leave and creating a week off or a number of days off. So it is a pretty big travel period. August is actually bigger though, which is the summer holiday period. And then the other big travel period is year end, right at the end of December, early January. So those are the three really big travel peaks.
Terrific. Derek, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It's live from Tokyo. A big invitation for you to join us back here in the top end as soon as you can. I'm sure a lot of our members
love to come visit again.
Get you around, have a beer with you, have a chat, take you out and show you their experiences. But mate, thank you very much for your time today. Most informative. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.